By the way, I put on the note for your wedding shower gift. I put what a day, what a week, what a month, what a life, what a couple. So so maybe I don't know if you see that part or not. Maybe you will
I
when
don't
you
know when we dive into it. We're still
when you,
kind of coming up to the surface. We just married August 11th, and then we honeymooned a bit, landed back, and we're just finishing up a move, crosstown move. So
wow,
so
nice.
I'm in this beautiful new office space, but I've still got lots of boxes, and all of my books are disorganized. They're strewn on the shelf. But
Yeah.
it's not like you there. Just the
Hey.
finely organized shelves behind you. Oh, so beautiful. Shelf envy happening over here.
I actually had a group come from the youth group. It was like 2 or 3 kids and their mom, and they all came up here and helped me organize this library
Really?
about a year ago.
Oh,
So
really?
it was kind of organized, and then we just redid the whole thing. So, but as you know, when you buy new books that go into some of these categories, you have to kind of circle back and rethink where stuff goes.
Oh man,
And so
that'll preach. Yeah, where does one belong
it
in life?
it does preach, doesn't it? Wow. Let's hang on to that thought because I'm just gonna include all this. This is great. Okay, everybody, we're at the season finale of the official season 1 of Exploring Faith, Pursuing Grace, and we have back on the podcast none other than my good friend Aram Mitchell. Aram, what sort of shells have you been reorganizing lately?
Oh wow, that's great.
How about that?
Thanks for having me
Yeah.
back. I'm really proud of you and what you're doing with, all of your life. I love looking over your shoulder, seeing all the many ways that you minister to the world. But yeah, I love this platform, this project, and the heart with which you show up to it. Thanks for inviting me in. What shelves have I been organizing in life of late? Well, as I just mentioned, I've got my books to categorize and organize. But no, I have been. I've been in a season of life, and I guess when are we not in this? But I've been in a season of life where there's a lot of thresholds of transition, thresholds of change. I suppose that is the stuff of life, but particularly some big ones for me. I got married this summer, just last month. So my wife Emma and I are rooting down into a new home together. We just moved into a new home space together a couple of weeks ago, and
nice.
And we're also leaning into this coming season some new professional vocational opportunities. So these are the different shelves of life that I'm keeping busy. Busily organizing and hopefully also playfully organizing of late. Yeah.
You got to keep it playful, right?
100%. Yeah.
If we take it too seriously, that would just be terrible.
That's something that you do so well. I feel like, yeah. I mean, between card tricks and juggling, I don't know if we talked about this before, but sometimes I carry around a clown nose in my backpack when I'm out guiding wilderness experiences, because sometimes you just need to literally throw on a clown nose. Just take the edge off a little bit.
Absolutely, right? You have to throw on the clown nose. I mean, that's like me keeping a deck of cards with me everywhere I go, always in my backpack. Even in my hiking backpack, I keep a little deck of cards. Just you never know when you're on the trail and somebody needs to see one card vanish from one place and appear in another. I mean, that's just.
Absolutely. Have you had any illusionists on the podcast?
Oh man, I haven't, but that's such a good idea.
Interesting. Next season.
Yeah. Next season on Exploring Faith, Pursuing Grace, card tricks. I thought about bringing, actually, that you say that now, I thought about bringing people that are outside of the sort of theological world, but have so much to say in this space.
Who else?
Yeah, there's a guy named Coach Bennett on this app that I use called Nike Run Club. Yeah. And if you like to run at all, you should go download some of his runs on the Nike Run Club app. It's a free app. Cool. And I don't know why it's free because it's awesome. And there's one called the Grateful 5K, where as you're running for 5,000 meters, he just walks you through all the reasons why you should be grateful for the space that you're in, the shoes that are on your feet, the asphalt that's beneath your feet, the trail you're on. I mean, it's really good. You should go check him out.
That is spiritual
But
practice. It's like Ted Lasso quality coaching there. I love
it. Yeah. Oh, okay. I love that you brought that up because people say that Ted Lasso is based off of him because he has the mustache and everything else.
That's so great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's great. It is great. It is great. But, I thought about bringing people on like that, like musicians and artists and different people that could speak to spiritual practice, even though they wouldn't be labeled as a theologian or as a mystic or whatever.
Yeah.
But
as we all know, everything is spiritual after all.
I don't know if I've heard a really smart guy say that before. I like it. So you are moving into a few new occupational areas. You said,
yes.
What's Emma going to be up to?
Yeah, Emma is so she just finished up div school and is she's working at a church a church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as a pastoral associate there. So she and I are both in the same line of work. So she's serving a congregation in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then at the end of this month I'm going to start serving a congregation up in Edgecombe, Maine. And it's so this will be. I have been Pastor Aram at one point in my life. After I finished up seminary, so this would have been 10 or 12 years ago. I had a job as a congregational minister for children in Southern California at a church there in Claremont, California. It was such a beautiful season of life, and they embraced me as Pastor Aram. And when I entered into that position, it almost caught me off guard. I was like, oh, this is what I've been preparing for in so many ways, and yet, like, wow, what an honor, what a hefty, role, and
right.
And so I've been thinking a lot about that recently as I prepare for this new opportunity. But this will be the first time that I'm in a lead pastor role for a congregation. And it's a small congregation on the coast of Maine with this beautiful community of really engaged and active lay people, lay leaders, volunteers who are just like showing up and being church.
Nice.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about what that even means. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, seasoned Reverend, and I've been asking some of my pastor pals of all sorts recently. What is it you, from your experience? What is it do you think that I should be thinking about and asking and preparing as I step towards this new role, this new season of leading a church, contributing to the leadership culture of a church, but in a role as the lead pastor of this church, I am just like ready to be a sponge and to soak up all of your counsel and wisdom. Your warnings before the mic was hot here. You were providing me some warnings, so feel free.
I said, run far away. Jump in the ocean. Do something else.
But truly,
run into the wilderness.
Yeah, I'm curious what comes to mind or comes to heart when you what should I be thinking?
Well, entering into a pastoral role or a ministerial role of any kind, to me, is one of the most rewarding things you can do on this planet. I love all of it most of the time. But as you know, this role isn't limited to people who are called pastors. There's a lot of people who show up, like you mentioned just a moment ago, every single week as lay leaders or as volunteers who have so much to teach us and who can identify a lot with what we're going through. My wife, for example, is a school teacher, as you might remember, and she is a pastor. She is in a pastoral role. And if she's not, then explain to me what those 18 kids are doing in her classroom every single week,
Awesome.
if not being sheep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are her flock in a way. And the way that some of them behave, it's kind of like the one in the 90, the one in the 100 that runs off. She has like 10 out of 18 that run off all the time. So, it's even more intense than that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the pieces of advice that I would offer is be open to learning from lay leaders who are already familiar with the culture of the congregation that may not typically, uh, be called pastor or minister or reverend or
Yeah.
priest, right? Just as an example, right across the hall from me, right through this wall is Leanne. She sits there in front of her computer all day, taking calls, talking to people on the
Yeah.
phone, arranging benevolent help, things like that. She is a secretary or an administrative assistant or administrative minister. There's all kinds of roles and titles that people call her, depending on who you're talking to in the church. But she has a better pulse, a better finger on the pulse of the congregation than anybody else that I know within this church. If I'm ever going to use a example in a sermon that I kind of want to get a feel on how people might receive it, or if it would be effective, or if I want to teach a class and I wonder if that particular Sunday school class is going to be, is going to resonate with people. The first person I'll talk to is Leanne, um, and nobody would think to call her a pastor, but she fills that role in ways that many people
Yeah.
that are pastors don't fill that
Yeah.
role, right? So I guess my first piece of advice would be to open up to people who wouldn't be considered pastors, learn from their experience, listen to their advice about the culture of the
Yeah.
church, and yeah.
All right, Marjorie, I'm coming your way. I'm excited to give Marjorie a great big shout out. She's a woman who I
Uh,
know has been holding so much for the church that I'll be getting to serve here at the end of September, and that is really, really sound counsel.
oh yes, I really think it is. It's helped me out in a ton of ways. On the other hand,
Yes.
be prepared to listen to that spirit, the spirit that's within you, that voice that's inside your head
Okay.
that goes, hey, is this advice that I'm being given coming from a place of maybe let's keep the status quo, let's keep things comfortable,
Yeah.
let's keep our old
Yeah.
routines. But what I know in my heart is I've been called to this moment to lead them out of that routine, to lead them away from that status quo, to break that rhythm.
Yeah.
So that advice can be some of the best advice that you'll receive, but sometimes it can also come from people who are very comfortable with where they are, maybe even have a fear or anxiety around the idea of change. And so there is a balance because ultimately, if you're taking on that role of pastor, ultimately you have to make that decision, right?
Yeah.
You have to go where you truly believe the Spirit's leading you, and however that looks in your community, it may shake things up, but that's the voice of a prophet, right?
Yeah.
So
Daniel. Daniel. That's
yeah.
amazing. You said earlier that you weren't sure why the Nike app, Coach Bennett's stuff was free because it's so good, and I just want to reflect that back on you here. I'm assuming this is free to listeners. That is some good counsel, and I loved that. I
Well,
loved the on the other hand pivot that you.
yeah.
That's I think the marker uh, of spiritual maturity, or even just of a posture of spiritual maturing, I think is the
Hmm.
capacity to be able to hold the both and, right? To hold the complexity
Wow.
of more than one thing can be true simultaneously, and that on the other hand, I feel like that's a marker of a mature or maturing spiritual leader. Um,
Well, thank you. Well, I I have to credit you some, right? Because
well,
one of the things that's helped me out so much is the yearly retreat that you lead at Discovering Renewal with our intentional hiking.
yeah,
Because one of the places where you find that kind of balance
yeah,
is on the hiking trail,
Yeah.
right? You learn how to wrestle with the both, and you learn that, I really want to do this 8 mile hike today,
Yeah.
but I also have this little pain in my leg, and so I need to learn how to balance between what I want and what I need,
Yes.
and and allow the definition of what is good for me to be, to change and to fluctuate with your actual needs, instead of your ideal
Yeah.
needs. So
Yeah, well said.
yeah,
That's wild places, wild spaces are such a venue for spiritual formation, for spiritual practice.
yeah, that's right. Praying with your feet, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What are your hopes and your dreams about going into this new role
Yeah.
here on the coast of Maine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked um, to get to get to be in a community, in a space, in a role, with a collection of people where I get to accompany folks like in life transitions,
Yeah.
in the midst of big life changes, alongside of the quotidia, the mundane, like the changes of every day. I think like one of the through lines for me vocationally, regardless of which hat I'm wearing, um, is really it's about spiritual formation. It's about human formation. It's about accompanying people, supporting people, championing, encouraging, empowering people to become fully themselves, become fully human. And
Mm.
the ways that I love to do that is to support people, help people, give people permission, and sometimes like nudges to just really slow down enough to see who they are, like to see who they already are, so that
Yeah.
they more freely and wildly and authentically um, give themselves like that true self to
Mm.
the world, right? That sense of like rooting down in who we are for the sake of reaching out to contribute to the good, the beauty, the ecology
Yeah.
of love in the world. And
Mm.
so, as with I don't know, as with any interaction with like any human being, like I hope that I bring some of that to all my interactions, but to do that with a community, with a sort of with some longevity in place, like to get to do some long form relationship building, some
Mm.
long form
Yeah.
growing and learning and practicing spiritual formation practices together. So I'm really excited
Yeah.
about that, to get to know them and to get to like encourage them to know themselves better as well,
Mm.
um, as a means to the like to toward the end of showing up both like in the community and the world as as church, as an active agent of the goodness of God, of the stuff of
Mm.
divine love, like directly in the community and
Yeah.
in the world. So yeah, I guess that's I don't know how specific that was. It was kind of universal themes, but I'm actually really one of the things I'm really excited about is finding out how those kind of bigger, more universal theological ideas, like how do they take flesh in the
Mm.
specificity of these relationships, in the particularity of this community? Because I don't know exactly yet. I can't wait to find out.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Well, like that makes so much sense to me, because I know you as the uh, once a year, 3-4 days a week, take a group on hiking, on a hiking trip, and we might not see each other again for another
yeah,
year, right?
right.
Some of the connections we make, we keep those connections. We talk to them. Angel and I have been doing like a monthly Bible
Oh,
study over FaceTime.
yeah,
He sends me little questions and stuff from the book of John. He's reading through that right now. And then I know Greg and I
yeah,
talk quite a lot. Yeah, I had lunch with Mary not too long ago, and then I talk to Christine every now and then, and Brian and a few others. But most of the people that you see on these trips, you don't see them again for another year. And I'm so glad that that you and I have had this friendship and this bond we've created. But I can imagine that kind of arrangement, that kind of setup could get lonely in a way, right? Because you don't have that long-term community of people that you're always seeing. You have these little sporadic, like, oh, I remember you from last year, those kinds of bonds, which are great, but you need that kind of personal, continual sort of family gathering to be part of. So
yeah, I think so too. I appreciate you reflecting that back. Because I think I've thought of that from the angle of like where like the good long haul gritty work of spiritual formation takes place. It benefits from any number of experiences, some of which are these like kind of peak, quote unquote, peak experiences that maybe are on a retreat somewhere, or right of a sort of immersive time of focus. But I think that like the grounding space is a community of spiritual practice, and a lot of the work that I have done over the past decade or so in my life in relationship to guiding and facilitating experiences of spiritual formation, a lot of it has been guiding those peak experiences, which is a beautiful role, a special role. But I have so much admiration for parish ministers, and for social workers, and for people like your wife Laura, who's a teacher, who's in there every day, right? With these people. And is it Eugene Peterson's book, The Long Obedience in the Same Direction? I think it's Eugene Peterson. But just that idea of showing up to a community day in, day out, week in, week out for a long duration of time. There's something so vital and essential to that form of ministry, that like level of ministry, that things can happen. The like long process of alchemy can take place there in a way that it can't or isn't meant to in those more like peak immersive experiences. It's like a different role. And I've thought of that a lot just from like the perspective of people who are experiencing, like all of us who are experiencing our own formation. But I hadn't thought of it about in terms of what I kind of hear you saying of like the loneliness of the leader, right? And I think you're right. I think that there is like my heart does thirst for some of the consistency that I'm hoping to experience in this new role of pastoral leadership in the Hedgecote community.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Paul, in Scripture, about how he's going around planting all these churches, giving himself to all these churches, but he doesn't have a place where he can really just hunker down and be and exist and be fed, for time. And you see this sometimes, like with Corinth or some of these other places. He'll really get in there and stay for a few years, but most of the time he's getting run off from place to place, And there has to be an element of loneliness and frustration. I think we see some of that in some of his letters, where he's like, well, this person left me, and this person was sick, and this person was, it used to be no good to me, now they're useful to me. Like, you can really see that come out. Like he has this little group of people he's running around with, and besides that, he doesn't have like a long-term community. Wow. Do you have any fears going into this new role as lead pastor?
No fears. Yes, I do. Of course I do. I got the customary, the customary imposter syndrome, the sort of like, the dog chasing the mail truck and accidentally catching it, and then like, what do you do with it once you caught it? A little bit of like, oh, this is real.
Can I offer you something on
Absolutely.
that? When did they hire you?
So it was announced earlier this summer.
Earlier this summer. Okay.
When was
They hired who you were earlier this summer, not who you want to be 5 years from
Yeah.
now. Okay? Even how much you've progressed in your life, whatever that looks like, if it's been a series of ups and downs since the beginning of the summer, like they're not even expecting that. They're still expecting start of the summer Aram, and you're about to give them so much
Oh,
more. So
that's so good.
yeah.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is they hired the you of today, not the you of tomorrow. And so if you go into this new position thinking, well, I'm not good enough yet, you have to remember they didn't hire the yet. They hired the now, so
That's true.
uh,
Yeah.
and so even if you are an imposter, like that's who they hired. Like they looked at whatever that was and said, I'll have me some of that, please.
What are
So
gonna
you
get?
could,
Well, I so
yeah.
appreciate that, and yeah, and I like when that imposter syndrome comes up. Um,
Yeah.
it's one of the most natural things in the world for that to
Mhm.
come up. Some of
Yeah.
the other work that I am doing and have really been leaning into of late. Um, I've started a coaching practice. Speaking of Ted Lasso and Coach Bennett, a life
Yeah.
coaching practice where I meet with people one on one. Similarly to as I was saying before, like just to help them slow down, see precisely who they are, right, so that they freely give themselves to the world. It's a different context for similar vocational work, but in that context of coaching, one of the great gifts that I get to offer to folks who I'm sitting with in a coaching relationship is when inevitably whatever doubts, worries come up, right? Imposter syndrome is one of those. To
Yeah.
normalize that and say, of course, that's coming up. And usually,
Yeah.
those sorts of doubts and worries, however they manifest for you, usually those come up right at that point or that moment where you're about to like tip the scales toward doing the thing that you are here to do, right? Like
Yeah.
a beautiful like sort of self-protective mechanism of your brain that is like,
Mm.
whoa, slow down, this is scary, we're about to step out of the cave and there might be saber-toothed tigers there, but
Yeah.
that's when you like draw inward on your heart. You're like, okay, thank you, Greg, thank you for saving me and my ancestors, for the survival, the evolutionary role you have played, and also I'm okay. Like this is what I'm here for. I've got this.
Yeah. Yeah. So Greg, our good friend
Yes.
Greg, he said on a comment on a post I made just a few weeks ago on my Substack, healthy fear keeps us alive. Unhealthy fear keeps us from coming alive. How about that?
All right, Greg.
All right. There you are. The mystic, the centering prayer cohort leader at Discovering Renewal 2025.
Yeah.
There we
If the
go.
rosters aren't
So
full yet, they will be soon.
that's right. That's right. So I'll put a link to Discovering Renewal in the description too. So let's think about that for a second. So I love, by the way, some subtle references to Handling Your Fire by one Robert Holmes Bell that you and I both listen to. So I see the themes here of threads and setups.
Yes.
So your setup is changing. You're moving from wilderness retreats and individual coaching while still retaining that, transcending and including, and moving to this more full-time pastoral role or part-time pastoral role, whatever labels your particular congregation has on that. But the thread hasn't changed. Your setup has changed. That is, how the thread manifests itself has changed. But the thread itself has stayed pretty consistent in these past 10 to 12 years, like you mentioned a while ago. Yeah. And I think that's an important lesson for people to pick up on here that are listening to this, because you might be stuck in a setup right now that's just draining you. My wife's a school teacher. I hear all the time how she longs for some other kind of setup to present itself. And so just know that you don't have to stick with that setup. The thread can be realized in an infinite number of ways, as wide as your imagination. as wide as you're willing to take that chance. And Aram, like you mentioned, there's two different kinds of fear. There's the fear that's like, hey, I don't need to walk down this dark alley by myself tonight, and that's probably a good idea to not walk down the dark alley. But there's also that fear before, when you're on the starting line of a 5K, or when you're about to go on that hike, and there's that, you're going to hit your max elevation. You've never hit it before, and you're about to hit it this particular hike, and it's a little bit scary. Or you're about to jump off the high dive. There's that fear, but that fear is more of an invitation to let yourself, finally, I don't know, take that leap or take that first step or whatever it is. And we need to learn to differentiate between the scary kind of fear that keeps us alive and the unhealthy fear that keeps us from coming alive.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is beautiful. We do need to learn how to differentiate between those things and how to interact with them, relate with them, and like recognize them, like see them, notice them, so that then we can find our moves or interact.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like what you said a second ago, of normalizing those kind of fears, like imposter syndrome or whatever it is. Because one of the things that our friend Brian McLaren talks about is that our faith journey is less like a staircase and more like spirals in a tree. And it's not that you get through simplicity and you never, ever, ever go back there again, but you just encounter it in a new way on down the road. And I think the same thing is true with imposter syndrome. I'm sure there, I'm sure we like to think that there's people out there like LeBron James or Michael Phelps or somebody who never suffers with imposter syndrome. Like they just know that they're the best. I was watching a chess tournament with was just yesterday or maybe the day before, with Magnus Carlsen against Alireza Firouzja, and you're looking at Magnus Carlsen and you're like, okay, you're the highest rated chess player of all time. You never have doubts, right? But those people. Those people are human beings just like us, and so they do experience those kinds of emotions. Maybe it's at different degrees or in different areas, but everybody experiences that. And just normalizing it and learning to recognize it and flirt with it when it comes back around. Like, oh great, like for me, it's it's getting that time of the year when I know I'm going to face seasonal depression. I mean, it's right around the corner. I know it's coming. It happens every year. Like, how do I interact with it though? Do I go through it? Do I try to run away from it, which always makes it worse? Or do I just embrace it as something that I know happens to me and I just have to, be ready for, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think the one of the things that I've learned and have been trying to practice in my coaching work, coaching training, as a part of my coaching practice, I also make sure that I get coached regularly,
yes.
right? And one of the things that I learned and am learning to recognize more and more, or embrace more and more, is that like mastery or maturity in relationship to our inevitable experiences of doubt and worry is not that we cease experiencing them, but that we recognize them more skillfully, more quickly, and are able to continue on. And so, or just to use a simple analogy, like mastery isn't not falling out of focus, but it's just regaining focus more quickly, and like not staying in the churn of doubt and worry for as long as we maybe used to, right? And I think that's where normalizing really comes in to help us just like not unnecessarily suffer, like not suffer. It's like we are beautifully human. Like we are meant to have feelings and fears and doubts and worries. Like that is part of. It's so integral to being heartfelt humans.
Yeah.
Nice pencil, by the way. I love the black.
Oh, you like the Blackwing? You taught me this. You taught me this.
But yeah.
Hey, by the way, when I went to visit Montreat a few months ago, or maybe it was last month, I forgot when that was.
I remember.
Yeah, I sent you a selfie of me outside of Lake Susan. I was having coffee with Tanner.
Oh, awesome. Shout
Tanner,
out.
yeah, and he says, "I have something to show you." I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Let me look. It's in here in my bag somewhere. I know it's in here." And he pulls out a little nub of a Blackwing pencil.
Yes.
We have another convert.
That's fabulous.
So yeah. Um, so you talked a lot about this coaching. Can you give us the name? You haven't name dropped it yet.
Oh,
What's the name of it?
AramMitchell.com. No, you can find my coaching work at AramMitchell.com, along with like other
Sweet.
links to the other things I'm doing. But the model that I've been trained in and am continuing to practice and learn more from is through the Academy for Coaching Excellence, ACE, ACE, and it's you'll appreciate this as a theological mind. It's what the founder Dr. Maria Nemeth calls ontological coaching, and ontological being a big word that essentially means the study of being. Right? And I learned ontology among all of my disorganized books that I'm looking at are Paul Tillich's Systematic Theology up there, which I read in seminary, and Paul Tillich talks a lot about ontology as a theological category. And Paul Tillich's like famous theological articulation of who God is, of what God is that God is the ground of being. Right, which is an ontological understanding of God, ground of being. But this coaching model is not theological in nature, but it differentiates like the coaching context from a more like psychological therapeutic context. Right, like therapy is necessary for the sake of healing work, or even like pastoral work is oftentimes about spiritual liberation or spiritual healing. Coaching work is, you could ask Coach Bennett or Ted Lasso, right? Is about playing towards a goal, like bringing your best, playing towards a goal, like literally on a playing field. So on the playing field of life, what does it look like to really like tap into our qualities of being, like who we are in our heart, so that we're able to interact with the inevitable doubts and fears that our reptilian brain brings up when we're playing towards our goals in life, when we're playing towards the life that we want to live. And so I've been really excited about applying that model of ontological coaching in a practice that I'm open to coaching all kinds of people who are doing good things in the world, but I've really been zeroing in, at least as I like initially build up my practice, on supporting men, people who identify as men, who are in the midst of all the who are just in the midst of life, and wanting to show up in big ways in their work life, in their professional life, in their personal lives, their family life, their relationships, and feel overwhelmed in the midst of that. Whether it's overwhelmed by the day-to-day, or overwhelmed by the prospects of actually like contributing something constructive to the world as a man who's trying to practice a maturing masculinity rather than toxic masculinity, which is far too dominant. And what does it look like to support men who want to show up in big ways to their life? And that's who I'm really actively reaching out to. So if there's anyone listening to this that could use some support, I'd be delighted to talk. Whether or not me supporting you is the right move, like I am really keen to like help people identify the support that they do need.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad you're doing that. You're the perfect guy for it too. Just the time we spent together on the trail, really, and just even talking outside of the trail has just, I mean, I totally validate your feeling of imposter syndrome, but I don't see it from where I'm sitting. Okay, I hope you can appreciate that.
And sometimes we need people who can just reflect that, mirror that back to us.
Yeah. You do the same thing to me, right? You do the same thing for me, and I appreciate it so much. because I love how like at the retreat last year, your dad shows up. He's like, "Okay, where's Daniel? I've got to meet this guy." It's like, what? What are you talking about?
Yep.
I'm just over here. I'm just over here playing the mandolin, trying to mind my own business, man.
Keep behind your back.
Oh man. So let's you mentioned a second ago that we can find your coaching and your other projects at arammitchell.com.
Yeah.
What other projects you're talking about there? You got your Substack, I know. Why don't you start with
I
that?
guess that's the main other thing. So the coaching practice, and then I'm out there writing on Substack. Though I do gotta say that I've had a 3-month hiatus over here while I've been getting married, planning a wedding,
getting married and moving.
So I haven't been writing publicly to the same extent that I was prior to that. But I have been churning and jotting down stuff in my notebooks. And as do you ever like this, like the autumnal season? So I'm in the Northeast in Boston, and there's like an energy, like a crispiness. It's not the same like blossoming of spring energy, but it is kind of like a grounding and a reorienting to some kind of work. And so I say that just to say that like I'm excited to be to be like growing the coaching business that I was talking about. I'm excited to be leaning into this new ministerial opportunity and leaning into my writing practice as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, writing stuff, and then this is not an immediate priority, but I also I still love to design, curate, facilitate, co-facilitate those experiences of formation in wild places. And so we've got the Montreat experience coming up again in 2025, the week after Easter. And I've got designs to offer other retreats as well, and those will be popping up on my online spaces. Yeah.
Nice.
Can I say one more?
I think, yeah, absolutely, go for it.
Because this is something that I built earlier this year, and it's still active, like it's still available, and I get to engage with people who are engaging it. But I put together an online course called Spiritual Formation in the Wild, and it's an on-demand course, so people enroll in it, and then you get to hang out with videos of me and questions from me and different resources and practices. It's through the School of Global Citizenry, which is a great online continuing education platform. So yeah, you can if you're like a minister or a social worker or someone in a caring profession, especially, or just someone who's like curious about deepening your relationship with the stuff of wild nature, you can find a link for that on my websites as well. But the School of Global Citizenry has a bunch of great online courses. But this one, the Spiritual Formation in the Wild course, it's all like at your own pace. But I have a goal to create a follow up synchronous course or experience. So if you've taken the on demand course, then you can like join in the cohort that I'm going to go ahead and tease it here, but I'm thinking of calling that spiritual leadership in the wild, right? So there's like the personal practice of deepening your relationship with wild nature, and then what does it look like? Whether you're a pastor or you're a spiritual leader there in the front office at the church, or like if you're spiritual leadership in some form, some way, what does it look like to invite others into into their own wildness and into engagement with wildness in the world. So I'd love to talk with you offline some more about that, Daniel, at some point. But that's
absolutely
that I've been working on recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to you offline anytime, my friend. Let's see. Oh, I was going back to something there for a second. What was it there? We just have so much to talk about, and it feels like
pursuing grace here.
That's what we're doing. Just exploring faith and pursuing grace. Oh yes, maybe another piece of advice. Maybe a piece of advice that you take with I don't know, maybe a critical mind. Is you're going to be entering into this pastoral ministry, which means you're going to be creating maybe more and on a schedule, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to be sitting down and writing, when you want to or as you feel like. I
Yeah.
mean, because you're going to yeah, because it's like there's something expected of you every week, right? And so what I've done in my own ministry is I have not been afraid to double up
Mm,
across my different platforms.
that's really
So like
yeah.
I write, yeah, like I write a sermon
Yep.
and I preach it on Sunday and then I post
Mhm.
the text on Substack on Monday. So,
Yeah.
you know, so one study session basically, I don't know, one creative process becomes two,
Yeah.
just like that,
Yeah.
right? And then the voiceovers that you do, you do beautiful voiceovers on your posts. I mean, I just posted to a podcasting site. I mean, there it goes. Like, you can like exponentially increase your output without increasing your
Yeah.
work just by not being afraid to double dip.
That's awesome. They are out there on a podcast. All of those voiceovers, confluence formation.
Oh,
If you search confluence formation, because you're right. Like you just like click a couple of tabs, and then it all goes out there in the world in different ways.
exactly.
Daniel, I appreciate that. I was actually before we logged on, I jotted down just like a few words. And I was like, what do I've been talking a lot, but I was like, what do I want to hear from Daniel? And the words that I wrote down were pastoring, roles, and creativity. And I think some of my question was to ask you, like, I see you as a person who's got such an ethic of creation. Like you are making things in the world, and I admire it so much. I have since the moment I met you, and I was curious. I was curious. I wanted to ask, like, what is some of your creative process? Like, how do you manage to create and curate all these things? So you just gave me a little bit there, so I don't want to like lead you dry or anything, but that is something that I'm curious about. Is how you go about um, like managing the roles that you have in life, and not just your professional ones as well. How is Laura and the little ones? I was curious. How's your family?
Family's doing fantastic. My preschooler just started preschool. My daughter started a new daycare, which has been a little bit disruptive to some of the stuff we're talking about right now. For example, I can't go on hikes as much as I used to because she used to be at an all day daycare. Now it's a half day daycare, and so I don't have a lot of that solo time in the wilderness on these long hikes that last from 8 to 3 p.m. Like I could do just 6 months ago. So there has been some disruption. There has been, yeah, it is a new season, and so I have to. I'm thinking about investing in a really nice backpack that has a place for a toddler, or she can either stand up or sit down. So I'm thinking that's going to be my remedy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do what?
I said those little guys are portable.
they are. So we're going to see how that goes. So here's shout out to Corey. Corey will be listening to
Hey,
this.
Corey.
While, by the way, I'm predicting that right now we're on her TV in her office and she's working on invoices for her husband's company that she helps with.
Great.
So here we are. Let's wave to Corey. Hello, Corey. She is a huge inspiration for me in my creative process because she wants to read, and I don't know why. She wants to read everything that I write. So what I do is, as I'm typing on Substack, there's a little link at the bottom. If you hit settings, there's a link. It's called Copy Secret Draft link. And I send it to her while I'm writing. And so while I'm writing, she's refreshing the page and she's responding, going, "Ooh, that was a good point." Or like, "Oh, wow, you need to work on that one a bit." Or "You should reword this. This was like clunky," or whatever. And so
valuable. That's amazing.
So I would say is have a creative partner, a friend, a colleague, somebody that keeps that flame alive. Because one of the reasons that we create is to put that out into the world. And I think you may have said this to yourself. I know I've said it to myself, but like, and we really believe this. If this writing just changes one person, just helps one person, I don't care about the views. the monetization, whatever, like that's all, I just want, if I can help one person, right? And so having a creative partner who is invested in your work, who likes what you do, and who's a good friend to you, just them writing back and saying, this was awesome, it needs to get out there. You're like, wow, I got to do something else. I need to write 6 more things or whatever. And so I did a couple of classes from Rob Bell called Something to Say, Something to Write, and then one was called Preachers, Poets, and Prophets or something like that. Okay.
I've seen the videos.
And so one of the things that he talks about is buckets.
Yes.
Dude, buckets. So the idea of a bucket is you put a file folder on your computer. In my case, it's a notepad. It's a note document on my phone. Okay. And I'll type the name of a sermon or the name of an article, or really, I don't know what it's going to be. And this is another thing, Aram, that helped me out a lot that he talked about is sometimes you'll get an idea and you don't know if it's going to be a podcast or if its primary role is going to be a sermon or if it's just going to be a small point you make in an article. You don't know, but you write it down and then you live it. you sit with it. You carry it around in your pocket. And every time you see something, you come across something, you experience something, you think something, you have that conversation, you can take it and stick it in that bucket. That might be a link to a voice memo that you make that you upload to a private link on YouTube and like post the link in there or something. I don't know. It might be a picture of a t-shirt you saw or whatever. And you just have these ongoing documents going that you're constantly working on. Sometimes it's an actual document in a note folder. Sometimes it's just in my brain and I'm just keeping track of it, like in my brain, living with it. Yeah. This is one thing I never understood. Because I guess it's just not how I operate. When you read these pastoral books, as I'm sure you're gonna come across, and you're gonna read more as you get into this work. You're gonna go. It's gonna say things like, you should spend 12 hours a week preparing for your sermon. Okay, I have never been able to do that. Like my actual sermon prep time, if you count the amount of time that I'm sitting there, like jotting down notes or creating a PowerPoint, is probably less than 2 hours. Maybe not even that. Sometimes way less than that. But that's because I am living that thing in my brain constantly. I joked one time somebody said, how long have you been working on that sermon? It's like, what? Yeah, I've been working on that for 31 years and 9 months and 3 days.
I see that.
Like, what do you want from me? Yeah. Every revival I've been to, every book that I've read, every podcast I've listened to, every conversation I've had is led up to this moment right here.
That's good.
Yeah. So I would say that creative process that he offers matched so well with my personality, because I just don't sit down and work it out.
That's really great. Yes. And I think that that actually takes a lot of discipline to right, to like consistently actively fill up those buckets, and that's really admirable. I love it.
Can I give you an example of this? So on Saturday we had a birthday party for my daughter. Her birthday is this Friday. She's going to be 2 years old, and it's great. And we were at this park, and this girl from church, it's actually Corey's daughter, who's she comes up to me and she looks up and she has a mouthful of water, and she spits it all on me and runs off cackling. It is hilarious. So guess what my sermon was about the next day?
Definitely about that.
Yeah, well, there's a story in the book of Mark where Jesus spits on this guy. Well, this was the deaf guy. There is the one with the blind man with the clay, but the lectionary text was from Mark 7, and he heals a mute and deaf man, and he does it by spitting on his finger and touching the guy's tongue. And so I used that illustration in the sermon, and it happened the day before. Sometimes the universe just gives you good examples.
If you're paying attention, right? I mean, I feel like always got to come back to Mary Oliver at some point to wrap up
Yeah.
the conversation. And I love in one of her poems, shoot, which one is it? I can't remember, but she says at one point in the poem, instructions for living a life, pay attention,
Yeah.
be astonished, tell it.
Hmm.
And I think that's like, in a lot of ways, that's at least the preacher's role, right? If not the pastor's all in all, but like at least the preacher's role, or the ethic of preaching and the preparation that you're talking about. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And I know Mary Oliver, I heard at one point that she would like stash little notebooks and pencils like along her daily walking routes, so that wherever she had an idea, she would be able to like access a little. I don't know if they were Blackwing pencils, but like access a little notebook.
Blackwing.
That's awesome.
Blackwing pencils and moleskin notebooks.
in the
yeah. Hey, that's why I have a fanny pack. So, wow, this has been a fantastic conversation, Aram. Thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure. It's been great.
My pleasure. I love just knowing that we get together, something good will spark. I've enjoyed it.
Yes. Yeah. I do want to share one more book with you that I really liked. It was called How to Get Ideas. I might send you a link to it. It was also pretty important for my formation as a creative spirit. So
yeah. Brilliant.
But hey, after your ministry gets going down there or up there, everything's down there in the South, you know. Yeah. Once your ministry gets going really well up there, you should hop back on the podcast and talk to us about how it's going, and if my advice was terrible, if it helped you at all, if it got you fired. I mean, I don't know.
When's the next season starting up? Do you know?
So the idea is I'm going to post a few sporadic episodes sort of in between. I have an interview with Scott McKnight coming up in a couple weeks, for example. That's going to be really cool. But I want to start back in January. So I have like 3 months on, 3 months off, and just kind of go half of the year doing podcasts. So that's kind of the plan right now.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, counting on it. Yeah, let's try to maybe do one more before the next Montreat trip.
Absolutely. Hey, do you want to close this podcast out with a poem or a blessing or a prayer or however you want to do it?
Do you have anything there, like right next to you, that is a poem or a blessing that you've been using this week or in a couple of weeks?
It's one that you gave me. I probably talked about it in the last podcast, and it's not.
My notes are all boxed up.
Sure.
I'd be delighted.
That's okay. Yeah, here we go. Terry Tempest Williams. For far too long, we have been seduced into walking a path that did not lead us to ourselves. For far too long, we have said yes when we wanted to say no. And for far too long, we have said no when we desperately wanted to say yes. And that'll be enough. We'll see you next week. There we go, man. Wow. Hey, thanks for hopping on there. I'll if you do want to talk on the phone soon, let's definitely just, you can call me whenever. If I can't answer, I'll call you back. So, all right. I'll see you later, man.